Today's NDE afterlife experience is from Nelson discusses how at 38 years old, he was living a very self-centered but successful life, until a power near-death experience changed him. He talks about his experience crossing over during this near-death experience, what he saw, and the scary journey he took before being saved by the light. Welcome to Near-Death Tales. If this is your first time checking this channel out, I'm glad to have you here. My name is Joseph, and I will be narrating the near-death experiences of those who have died and have seen the other side. Today's experience comes from Nelson. Here it is. Hello everyone, my name is Nelson. I had a near-death experience on June 1st, 1985, and it changed my life completely. Prior to my near-death experience, I was a real die-hard atheist. At that time, I was 38 years old, a college professor, and completely self-centered about my career and my life. On June 1st, 1985, I was at the end of a 3-week art tour with a group of my students from the university where I taught. At 11 o'clock in the morning, in the hotel room, while trying to get the students going to another museum, I collapsed in the most acute pain I'd ever experienced in my whole life. My wife called the hotel desk, and they called an emergency medical service. A doctor came within probably 10 minutes and said that I had a perforation of the duodenum, which is a small stomach, and I had to have surgery within the hour or I would die. So, he called an ambulance. The ambulance came, and they then sent me several blocks away on a gurney to the surgical hospital. I was at the hospital of the Sisters of Public de Berry, and they sent me off to the surgical unit, Cochin. When I got to Cochin, I was put in a room. There was no surgeon available at the surgical hospital for the next 10 hours. I never saw a doctor, and I was never given any pain medication whatsoever. One of the things that I find very annoying is people always tell me, "Oh, I just had this near-death experience because it was like some kind of drug trip." For 10 hours I begged, pleaded, and cried for somebody to give me a painkiller, and I was given nothing. A nurse came in and said she was sorry, but they were unable to locate a doctor, and they would try and get one the next day, which would have been Sunday. When she told me that, I was so weak and I had a great deal of difficulty breathing for a long time, which is all my energy, all of my thought, all of my strength. Everything about me was all focused on breathe in, breathe out. So when the nurse left the room, I told my wife, "It's time for us to say goodbye. Tell my kids I love them, tell my parents I love them," etc. She started crying like I'd never seen anybody ever cry before because this was farewell forever. She sat down in the chair, was crying, and I closed my eyes and I stopped trying to breathe and I went unconscious. I woke up and I felt wonderful, absolutely wonderful, the best I ever felt in my whole life. I was delighted, happy, amazed, surprised, bewildered. But the good thing was, I felt really good, and I did a reality check of my body and realized that I could taste, see, smell, touch. Everything was greater than it ever had been in my whole life. I tried to communicate with my wife from my perspective, but she didn't react to me before. She couldn't see me or hear me. Standing there yelling and screaming at her, I turned to my roommate, who was a very kind Frenchman. I got no reaction from him. I was very angry, very confused. The worst possible thing happened. I saw the body in the bed. It looked just like me. I refused to accept that it was me because I was alive, standing next to this body. There was this thing that looked like me in the bed, but that can't be, that's not me. I heard people calling me outside the room saying, "Howard, Howard, come hurry, we gotta go, we gotta go." So I went over to the doorway of the room and there was a group of people in the dark hallway. They were standing out of the shaft of light coming from the room, so they were back in the shadows. There were maybe 8 of them, adults, men and women. I said, "I'm sick, I need a doctor. I'm supposed to have surgery." They replied, "We know all about you. We've been waiting for you for a very long time, and it's time for you to come with us now." I wanted to believe that they were hospital people coming to take me to the doctor, so I left the room and they took me on a very long walk, a journey. Fairly soon in the journey, I realized that there were no stairs, no ups or downs, no walls and no ceiling. I soon realized that it was getting darker and darker on this journey. The other thing was that the people with me stopped acting. Professionally, they started making crude, rude remarks about me. That was getting kind of scary. These people aren't nice, you know. They want to have their way with me. Eventually, we ended up in a place where there was no light at all, complete darkness. I said, I stopped moving with them. The group had grown a lot, many people. I don't have no idea how many, maybe hundreds. And they're not going to go any further. They said, you have to go, you're not there yet, you got further to go. And I said, I'm not. I'm going back. Which was a bluff because I had no idea where I was, in which way was right, left, or, I didn't know which way was back. So I stopped moving, and they started to push and shove me. So I fought back. I'm punching, I'm hitting, I'm kicking, and they're giving it all back to me. They wanted to tear me apart, which they did. But when they had completed their job and me lying there like a piece of roadkill on the ground of that place, I was still alive, still thinking. And I was like, why? What is this? Where am I? How did this happen to me? Who are these horrible people? There was no way out, and I heard a voice from outside of myself say, pray to God. And I thought, I don't believe in God. That's ridiculous. And I'm praying, and the voice said, pray to God. I thought, I don't know how to pray. I haven't prayed since I was a child. I don't even know what to say. And the voice very strongly and kind of loudly said, pray to God, something. Okay. When I was a kid, I went to Sunday school and we learned prayers. So I'm trying to remember something that I'd memorized because that's what children are taught prayer is. You memorize, like the Lord's Prayer or the 23rd Psalm or something, and you recite them. So I could only remember like the first few words of the 23rd Psalm and the Lord's Prayer, and I said those aloud. Not that I believed in God, but this voice told me to do it. So I'm doing it. And the people around me became incredibly angry, and they were saying, in language that's the most obscene, horrible language I've ever heard in my whole life, that there is no God and nobody can hear me. And now, if I don't stop, they were going to make things much worse for me. Well, for the first time in my whole experience with these people, I was able to get a reaction from them. It was a bad reaction, but at least it was like I was able to metaphorically punch back by saying prayers. So I started making up prayers. Now, I've never told anybody what I actually prayed because it was very crude. Something like, God is going to expletive deleted get you. Laughter. Those were my prayers, but anyways, they were sincere, and that I was using God as sort of like the fist, bathroom. And the more I mentioned God, the more they were screaming at me to stop. But the important thing was that they kept retreating back into the darkness, because they could not bear any mention of God. So they left me alone, and they left me in that place for a very long time. And in that time, I thought about my life and realized, what was I alive for? 38 years old, and I thought I was like God's gift to the world. I thought I was so important. I was a big shot. And I realized I was nothing. Everything that I thought about myself was all a delusion of ego, and I just sank into real despair, hopelessness. And then a very vivid memory came to me as a child in Sunday school, singing Jesus Loves Me. I could see myself in Sunday school with the other kids singing this. But most importantly, in my memory, I could feel what it felt as a child. I could feel that I loved this Superman guy named Jesus. And when I was a little kid, I used to pray to him and stuff like that, and I believed in him and he would answer my prayers. Instead, I don't know, Jesus. If you're real or not, I don't know if you care about me or not. I don't know if you want to hear my prayer, but Jesus, please save me. And what I meant by save me was rescue me, get me out of this place. And to my surprise, a tiny little light, like a star, appeared in that darkness. And it got very bright, very fast. And it came over me, right in front of me. It was impossibly bright white light, way brighter than the sun times 10,000. And out of it emerged hands and arms. He reached down and touched me, and when he touched me, all that gore and all that stuff just kind of drifted away, and I was completely whole. And his hands went behind my back, and he picked me up and put his arms around me and held me very strong, very tight up against himself. And I cried like I never cried in my adult life. I cried like a baby, with my face buried in his chest, and he rubbed my back like a mom or a dad would do with their child. And it was the greatest happiness and love that I've ever experienced in my life. And I knew that he didn't just love me, he wanted me and cared about me, and I'm just basking in that great love. And all of a sudden I realized my feet are not on the ground anymore. We're moving, and we are going straight up. And so we're moving and going faster and faster, and I'm trying to get my composure because I've been crying so hard. Finally, I get enough, and I look up to where we're heading. And what I see is what, at first, I think is a huge galaxy of stars, except then I realize that all the stars are moving this way, in that way. It's not stars. There are other beings of light, and yet we're moving towards it. And I think to myself, he's made a terrible mistake. I'm a piece of garbage. I don't belong here. Because I felt so dirty. And with that, we stopped outside of this realm of light and light beings. And he spoke to me for the first time, telepathic. And he said, "We don't make mistakes. You do belong here." And I thought, I didn't say, "How'd you know what I was thinking?" Because I didn't say it. He said, "I know everything you've ever thought." And then I thought, oh, this is really bad because I've thought a lot of things that I don't want you to know that I've thought. And he laughed. So we began to converse, and kind of funny, but he's the coolest guy.